Hi, my name is Justin Henderson. I'm a nurse practitioner. I'm going to talk to you today about different ways that you can make herbal products on your own. We're going to focus right now on making tinctures. Tinctures are a liquid herbal extract that has a very long shelf life. They can be made with things like alcohol or glycerin or apple cider vinegar. Alright, so let's make some tincture. The basic things you're going to need is a menstruum and a herb. The menstruum is the liquid portion. Typically alcohol is the best one to use because it has the longest shelf life and it extracts the biggest range of herbal components. But apple cider vinegar works quite well, and so does glycerin. Sometimes the most economical way is to start with grain alcohol and then dilute it down to 40%. But any 40% alcohol works great for herbal parts, the leaves and flowers. If alcohol is not your thing, vegetable glycerin works really well. It comes in different sizes. You can use it straight, or some people dilute it to about 60%. Apple cider vinegar or rice vinegar or any of the vinegars except for white vinegar are also good to use. And they also have a long shelf life. If you use some roots or barks to make your tincture, though, you want to go stronger. You want to go with 60% alcohol for that, but 40% alcohol is good for everything else. The next thing you have to contemplate is whether you want to grind your herbs up or use them whole. Whole herbs are easier to work with. Ground herbs have much more surface area to them, so they contact more of the liquids that will give them a stronger extract. But later, when it comes to separating them, the ground up herbs are a little bit harder to deal with, a little bit messier. So if you're going for ultra simple, you just use whole chopped up herbs. Basically what you're going to do is put them into a jar. A wide mouth jar is easier to work with. You dump your herbs in here. And if you're going with the simple method, you would just put in enough liquid to cover the dried herbs and then close it. Now if you want to get more sophisticated, you'll need a scale and some kind of liquid measuring device like this. And you want to use ratios. The ratio range is usually 1 to 3 up to 1 to 5. The more herbs and the less liquid, the stronger. So a 1 to 3 ratio would be much stronger. This is a good example of a nice semi-ground 1 to 3. It's mostly herbs up to here. And this has this gun with kava roots, so it's got a nice 60% alcohol in it. Here's what one looks like if you just put the whole herbs in after you drained it. This is some lemon balm, and it's already had the liquid drained out of it. Now let's talk about these ratios in a little bit more detail. The basic proportions in the ratio is 1 part herb to whatever part liquids. The more liquid, the weaker. Your kind of standard ratio is 1 to 5. 1 gram of herb to 5 milliliters of liquid. Typically 1 to 3 to 1 to 5 is the main range most people use. Now if you use fresh herbs, it's a little bit different. Then you would do 1 to 1 or 1 to 2. But most dried herbs are much easier to work with. In order to grind these to a powder, you can use a coffee grinder or a Vitamixer or some kind of blender. Amber glass is definitely preferable to clear glass, but as long as you're storing them in a dark closet somewhere or a cabinet, it won't really matter too much. But this will protect them from the sunlight and make them last longer. The next thing I want to talk about is really important, and that's labeling. Labeling your products on the jar is the best way. If you label the lids, it's easy to get them mixed up. You want to include the herb you're using, the ratio, 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 5, percent alcohol, and the date is really important. So after you combine the liquid and herbs, you want to let them sit for about a month. Most of the extraction has already taken place after about 3 days, but the last like 5% or so, it takes another several weeks. You want to shake it about every 3 days to mix it up and get that surface area to contact with the liquid. Now keep it strong. And after it's sat for about a month, you want to decant or separate them. Some of the more traditional esoteric herbalists would use a lunar cycle with this process too. They would start the whole tincture making process on the new moon when it's darkest, and then separate it on the full moon. That's just kind of an old tradition. Now moving on to the decanting process. You basically want to get some cheesecloth, a filter, or an old t-shirt works great. Old cotton t-shirts are a great way to sift it all out. You want to saturate them with water and wring them out really good first so you don't lose some of your tincture in the process. So when you're decanting, you want to use a wetting cloth. Cotton is fine, or cheesecloth. A strainer helps in a bowl. Basically, I want to line this strainer with the cotton. Take your tincture. There's a little ginseng one here. Now I loosen, I'm going to give it a good shake again just to kind of get it out of the jar because it's kind of caked up in there a little bit. And just dump it into here. Whoa. And here's the heavy stuff. This one was obviously a powdered form. When they're done whole herb, it's much easier. And it'll look more like this, and it's a lot easier to separate. So get all that tincture out of there. Just basically want to fold it over, try not to spill anything. And if you can basically just tie it off, and you can start twisting it. Now, if you're more industrious, you can get a hydraulic press, or what they call a rice or potato squisher presser, and you can get a little more leverage in this. If you're only using a small batch, that doesn't matter. You'll lose a little bit in the dried material inside, but not that much. You got the kind of pressed herb in there. Most people just discard this, but you might come up with some other kind of... Most of the extract has come out of it, so it's mostly just herbal material at that point. Shouldn't be very much medicinal use left to it. This is a nice fine silk screen. This will take some more out. And if you let this sit for a while, it'll start to separate actually, and you can do successive trials for this. Or you might have to go back through a coffee filter or the cotton filter a couple more times. It's up to you how far you want to filter it. The more times you filter it, the more clear it'll get. And then you can also decant it off after you let it sit. When it's separated for a while, you can separate the liquid off. So herbs that are not powdered are a little bit easier to work with. You can see it's much easier to separate them, and you don't have all the powder gunking everything up. But you do lose a small percentage of potency in that trade-off there. Alright, now we get to talk about the good part, putting it to use. So this is some kava root tincture that has not been separated yet, and it's been sitting still for a while, so you can probably can't see in the video, but there's a clear line here and an herb line there. So if I'm feeling lazy, I can siphon some of this off the top and jar it up. Leaving it in beyond the month can make the flavor change a little bit and make it a little stronger. It's not a big difference, there's a subtle difference. Some of the mild herbs might taste a little worse if you leave it longer. So I'm going to open this up and try not to stir it up. I'll take my kava tincture bottle here. This is the same one, so I'm just kind of refilling this one basically. You'll notice I've got the important details labeled on here, and the bottle itself labeled. It's a nice little pipette. A turkey baster works too, but not as well. So I'll just fill some up. Top this guy off. And that's ready to use. You can also use these little spray bottles to do sublingual sprays. You can put drops in your tongue or sprays. Some people, it's just a preference thing. Same thing, you just fill it up and label it, and you're good to go. Tinctures will typically have a shelf life of 5 years when they're made with alcohol, and they're very portable, easy to carry around, and they last a long time. Hope you enjoy using them. Some people like to flavor their tinctures, and there's a couple ways that you can do this. The simplest is to use a flavor to the core from the beginning. Things like Rumple Mints or Grand Marnier have flavors in them already. They'll come with the liquid already, and they're usually about 40% alcohol, so they're just right. Another option would be add a couple of drops of essential oil to the eyedropper at the end. After you've mixed your tincture together, you can just add 1 or 2 drops of an essential oil into the bottle and shake it, and you'll have a nice flavored tincture. You can add more or less up to your taste. Now with ethanol or alcohol-based products, the concept of decarboxylation is usually sidestepped because the alcohol extracts out all the cannabinoids in a way that's useful. I've heard some people say it still makes sense to decarboxylate a tincture, but for the most part, most people don't do that. If you wanted to, you could actually heat the tincture to 240 degrees for 30 to 40 minutes. It'd be better if you did that in some kind of closed system so you don't lose a whole lot to evaporation. That's just an optional step.